The fastest way to lose respect is to become available before anyone has earned access to you. Ryan Bennett did not learn this from a book. He learned it at 9:47 on a Thursday night, when his phone lit up with another message from Derek Hayes. It was not an emergency. It almost never was. But the message had the same quiet pressure as always. Quick favor, need this before morning, should not take long. Ryan stared at the screen and felt the old pull inside him, the pull to respond instantly, to prove he was dependable, to be the person no one could complain about. That was the trap. He thought being available made him valuable. But over time, it had made him expected. Derek did not ask with respect anymore. He asked like someone reaching for something already on the table. And the darker truth is that many people will treat your time exactly the way you train them to treat it. If you always answer, they stop wondering if they should interrupt you. If you always adjust, they stop noticing what it costs you. If you always appear when called, your presence stops feeling like a choice and starts feeling like a service. Ryan was not weak. He was kind, capable, responsible, and quietly afraid. Afraid that if he said no, people would think less of him. Afraid that if he delayed, someone else would become more useful. Afraid that if he stopped being easy to reach, he would stop being needed. You may know that fear. It is the employee who replies to late emails while sitting on the couch with dinner getting cold. It is the friend who cancels their own plans because someone else suddenly needs emotional support. It is the person in a relationship who answers every message fast, gives too much, explains too gently, and then wonders why they are treated like they will never leave. Ryan had confused access with connection. He had confused usefulness with respect. And Derek, without needing to be cruel, had learned the pattern. He knew Ryan would answer. He knew Ryan would say it was fine. He knew Ryan would swallow the irritation, do the work, and show up the next morning tired but smiling. That is how people become invisible while being needed by everyone. They are used constantly, but valued less. They are relied on, but not honored. They are present everywhere, but their presence has no weight. The first hidden rule is uncomfortable. People rarely respect what they can reach without effort. This does not mean you become cold, selfish, or unavailable to everyone. It means your time, your attention, and your emotional energy need a boundary, or the world will turn them into a public resource. Ryan did not understand that yet. He still believed respect would come if he gave more. But the room, the office, and Derek had already learned something else from him. Ryan will always make room for us, even when we make no room for him. And once people believe your access is free, they stop feeling the value of entering your life. The strange thing about being too available is that it does not feel like self-betrayal at first. It feels like being good. Ryan told himself he was reliable, thoughtful, easy to work with, the kind of man people could count on. And in American offices, that can sound like a compliment. Be a team player. Go the extra mile. Stay flexible. Answer quickly. Do not make things complicated. But hidden inside those phrases is a social test most people never notice. How much of yourself can people take before you finally create a limit? Derek had learned Ryan's limit was almost invisible. A late-night message. A last-minute spreadsheet. A meeting moved on to Ryan's lunch break. A weekend favor described as just a quick thing. None of it looked dramatic enough to call out, but all of it taught the same lesson. Ryan's time could be invaded without consequence. And this happens outside work too. In relationships, someone gets used to your instant replies, then becomes irritated the one time you take space. In family, people expect you to show up for every crisis, but rarely ask what it costs you. In friendships, you become the listener, the fixer, the dependable one, until your own silence is mistaken for strength instead of exhaustion. The game is not always played by bad people. Sometimes it is played by ordinary people responding to repeated access. If you never make people wait, they stop experiencing your time as valuable. If you never say no, they stop treating your yes as a choice. If you never protect your energy, others begin to assume it belongs to the room. Ryan began to feel this in small moments. Derek would thank someone else publicly for a polished presentation, then privately send Ryan more cleanup work. A coworker would say, "You are the best at handling this," when what they really meant was, "You are the least likely to refuse." Even in his personal life, Ryan noticed how quickly people reached for him when they needed something, and how slowly they noticed when he was drained. That recognition was uncomfortable because it forced him to see the pattern. He was not being respected for always being available. He was being used as emotional and practical convenience. And the darker truth was that he had mistaken being needed for being valued. Being needed can feel powerful when you secretly fear being forgotten. But need is not the same as respect. Some people need their phone charger, their coffee, their assistant, their backup plan. Need only means you serve a function. Respect means they recognize the person behind the function. Ryan had become a function. Reliable Ryan. Helpful Ryan. Always there Ryan. And the more he became that role, the less people saw the man inside it. That is why availability without boundaries slowly erases you. Not all at once. Not loudly. But through every moment you answer when you are tired, agree when you are resentful, smile when you feel taken for granted, and call it kindness because admitting the truth would hurt too much. Ryan was beginning to understand that the world does not always punish you for having no boundaries. Sometimes it rewards you just enough to keep you without them. Ryan's mistake was not that he cared. The mistake was that he reacted like every request was a test of his worth. When Derek's name appeared on his phone, Ryan did not pause and ask whether the request deserved his energy. He felt the old fear first. If I do not answer, I may look unreliable. If I say no, I may lose approval. If I take too long, someone else may replace me. That fear made him fast, and speed made him predictable. Derek did not have to pressure him loudly. He only had to create urgency, and Ryan would finish the job of controlling himself. This is how too much availability becomes a weakness. Not because helping is wrong, but because automatic helping teaches people that your inner state does not matter. Ryan explained too much when he needed rest. He apologized when he had done nothing wrong. He gave reasons for boundaries before anyone had earned the right to question them. Even his no sounded like a yes that had been injured. I am so sorry, I wish I could, but maybe I can try later. That was not a boundary. That was a negotiation opened by guilt. And people can feel that. They can feel when your limit is not a wall, but a curtain. Ryan thought explanations made him seem reasonable, but often they gave Derek more material to push against. If Ryan said he was busy, Derek asked how long it would take. If Ryan said he was tired, Derek said it was only a quick favor. If Ryan said he had plans, Derek made the work sound urgent enough to make those plans feel selfish. The more Ryan explained, the more doors he opened. This happens in relationships too. You tell someone you need space, then spend 20 minutes making sure they are not upset with you. You say you cannot come to a family event, then offer 3 emotional essays to soften the disappointment. You tell a friend you are overwhelmed, then still become their therapist until midnight. You are not being clear. You are asking for permission to have a limit. Ryan's deepest wound was that he needed to be seen as good. Not respected, not understood, not equal. Good. The dependable one. The harmless one. The one who never makes anyone uncomfortable. But being addicted to being good can make you easy to use. Because the moment someone hints that you are selfish, cold, difficult, or disappointing, you rush to prove you are not. Derek did not need to insult Ryan. He only had to make Ryan feel like refusal would damage his image. And Ryan would abandon himself to repair it. That is the hidden hook. The need for approval turns every request into a moral exam. You stop asking, is this fair to me? And start asking, will they still like me if I say no? Once that happens, your time is no longer yours. Your energy is rented out to anyone who knows how to trigger guilt. Ryan had become available not because he had endless strength, but because he was afraid of what might happen if people met his limits. And the darker truth was this. People were not respecting his sacrifice. They were organizing their lives around it. The hidden law Ryan had missed was simple. The person who controls their reaction controls their position. Derek did not have more power because he was louder, smarter, or more important. He had power because Ryan reacted first. Derek could send a short message, and Ryan's mind would start moving. Derek could create urgency, and Ryan would rearrange his evening. Derek could say, I thought you were the best person for this, and Ryan would feel the hook of being needed. That was Derek's real leverage. Not force, not cruelty. Pattern. Derek was not a villain. He was a practical man in a demanding office who had learned which people pushed back and which people absorbed pressure. With some coworkers, he planned ahead because they required it. With Ryan, he waited until the last minute because Ryan made last-minute work possible. That is how social position is often built in ordinary life. People do not always decide your place by what you deserve. They decide it by what your reactions allow. If you panic when someone is disappointed, they learn disappointment controls you. If you rush when someone says urgent, they learn urgency owns you. If you over-explain when someone questions your boundary, they learn your boundary can be negotiated. Ryan began to see that every request from Derek had two layers. The first layer was the task. The second layer was the test. Will you answer immediately? Will you apologize for having a life? Will you prove you are still useful? Will you make my lack of planning your emergency? And Ryan had been passing the wrong test for years. He kept proving he could be used, then wondering why he was not respected. This happens everywhere. A friend calls only when they are falling apart, and you answer every time, even when you are exhausted. A partner becomes distant, and you rush to restore warmth that they keep withdrawing. A family member uses guilt, and you cancel your plans to avoid being called selfish. Each time, the same law is working beneath the surface. Whoever can trigger your reaction can influence your position. The way out is not to become hard or uncaring. It is to stop making your nervous system available for other people's convenience. Ryan did not need to hate Derek. He needed to stop letting Derek's timing become his command. He needed to understand that calm is not passive. Calm is a refusal to be pulled before you choose. The next time Derek's message arrived late, Ryan looked at it and felt the old instinct rise. Reply, explain, rescue. But for the first time, he did nothing immediately. He let the request sit there. He let the discomfort move through him without obeying it. And in that small silence, something changed. Derek had created pressure, but Ryan had not converted it into surrender. Then the reversal came, and it was not comforting. It was sharp. Ryan realized Derek had not stolen respect from him in one dramatic act. Ryan had slowly handed it away through repetition. Every late-night reply had taught Derek that Ryan's evenings were negotiable. Every rushed favor had taught him that Ryan's time could be rearranged without cost. Every long explanation had taught him that Ryan felt guilty for having limits. The problem was not only that Derek expected too much. The problem was that Ryan had spent years making too much look normal. That realization stung because it removed the easy story. It was simpler to say people were selfish, demanding, and careless. Sometimes they were. But Ryan also had to face the part of himself that kept rewarding the behavior he hated. If someone sent a careless request and he answered instantly, he trained carelessness. If someone ignored his exhaustion and he still delivered, he trained disregard. If someone made guilt the price of saying no and he paid it every time, he trained control. This did not mean Ryan was to blame for other people's behavior. It meant he was responsible for the access he kept granting after the pattern was clear. That is the twist. Most people avoid. People often treat you according to the standards you repeatedly enforce, not the value you secretly hope they will recognize. Ryan had been hoping people would notice his sacrifice and respect him for it. But sacrifice without boundaries rarely creates respect. It creates expectation. Derek did not see Ryan's late nights as proof of worth anymore. He saw them as part of the system. Reliable Ryan. Available Ryan. The man who would quietly absorb the pressure and call it professionalism. And once Ryan saw that, he could not unsee it. The issue was not that he needed to become colder. It was that he needed to stop teaching people that warmth meant unlimited access. He needed to stop confusing kindness with self-erasure. He needed to stop acting like every request deserved an immediate response just because someone else felt urgent. The old Ryan believed saying no would make people respect him less. The new Ryan began to understand that saying yes too easily had already done that. Respect does not grow where your boundaries are invisible. It grows where your presence has conditions, your time has value, and your energy is not available to anyone who knows how to trigger your guilt. That night, Ryan looked at Derek's message again. The words were the same. The pressure was the same. But Ryan was not. For the first time, he saw the request not as a command, but as information. Information about Derek's habits. Information about his own fear. Information about the pattern he had the power to end. He did not reply immediately. He did not draft a paragraph. He did not apologize in advance for being human. He placed the phone face down and let the silence teach a new lesson. Access to him was no longer free. Ryan's first technique was controlled silence. Not the kind of silence used to punish people, but the kind that keeps you from surrendering before you have chosen. When Derek sent another urgent message, Ryan did not answer from guilt. He waited. He let his nervous system calm down before his fingers touched the screen. That delay became his first act of self-respect. Most people lose their frame in the first 5 seconds after pressure arrives. They rush, explain, apologize, and give away more than the moment deserves. Ryan stopped doing that. He learned to respond after he had returned to himself. Then came the cold boundary. Clear, short, calm. I cannot take that on tonight. No long defense. No emotional decoration. No apology for having limits. Derek pushed once, saying, "It should be quick." Ryan felt the old instinct to prove he was still helpful, but he held the frame. "I can look at it tomorrow morning." That was all. A boundary becomes weak when you turn it into a debate. Ryan also stopped trusting words more than patterns. Derek could say, "I really appreciate you," but Ryan watched the behavior. Did appreciation come with better planning, or only more access? Did respect show up before the favor, or only after Ryan delivered? Patterns told the truth. Words softened it. This was not manipulation. Ryan was not trying to make Derek anxious or powerless. He was protecting his own time, energy, and emotional control. He was learning that self-mastery begins when urgency no longer owns you. The technique was simple but uncomfortable. Pause before responding. Say less than your fear wants to say. Let people feel the edge of your boundary. Observe what they do next and keep your frame. His frame was not, "I need Derek to respect me." His frame was, "My time already has value, whether Derek recognizes it or not." That changed the energy. Derek could still ask. Ryan could still care. But the request no longer entered his life like a command. It had to meet a locked door, and Ryan finally held the key. The change did not arrive with a dramatic confrontation. It arrived in the moments where Ryan stopped doing what everyone expected. The first thing people noticed was not what he said. It was what he no longer did. He no longer answered every message within minutes. He no longer treated every request like an emergency. He no longer volunteered explanations before anyone had asked for them. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable. Ryan worried people would think he was becoming distant, difficult, or selfish. But something unexpected happened. The more he protected his time, the more carefully people approached it. Derek noticed it immediately. One evening, another last-minute request appeared. Hours passed before Ryan responded. The next morning, Derek's tone was different. Not warmer, more careful. For years, Derek had been working with a version of Ryan who was always available. Now he was meeting someone else. Someone who could tolerate disappointment. Someone who could let a message sit unanswered without feeling guilty. Someone who no longer rushed to repair every moment of tension. The office began to feel different too. Coworkers stopped assuming Ryan would automatically take extra work. They started asking instead of expecting. They started planning ahead. They started treating his time like something that had value. This is one of the strangest truths about human behavior. People often become more aware of your worth when you stop giving unlimited access to it. Ryan was still helpful, still professional, still kind, but his kindness finally had structure. And structure creates weight. Before, people could predict him. Need something late? Ask Ryan. Need a favor nobody wants? Ask Ryan. Need someone to absorb pressure quietly? Ask Ryan. Predictability made him useful, but it also made him easy to manage. Now the pattern was broken. Ryan did not react automatically. He paused. He considered. Sometimes he agreed. Sometimes he declined. Sometimes he waited. And because people could no longer predict his response, they started paying closer attention. That is where silent power begins. Not in controlling others, but in becoming less controllable yourself. Ryan was becoming harder to read because his actions were no longer driven by fear. People could not easily tell whether guilt would work, whether urgency would work, whether praise would work, whether disappointment would work. The old buttons were still there, but they were no longer connected to immediate reactions. Derek felt it most clearly during a team meeting. A task came up that nobody wanted. Normally, all eyes would drift toward Ryan. This time Ryan simply listened. Calm, present, unmoved by the invisible pressure floating around the room. When Derek finally looked at him, expecting the familiar rescue, Ryan met the look without rushing to fill it. A few seconds passed. Then someone else volunteered. It was a small moment, almost invisible, but Ryan felt something shift. For the first time, he realized that much of the pressure he carried had been pressure he automatically accepted. And now that acceptance was gone. People could still ask. They could still test. They could still hope. But they could no longer assume. The man who once made himself available to everyone was becoming something rarer. A man whose presence had limits. A man whose attention had value. A man who no longer gave strangers, co-workers, or expectations unrestricted access to his peace. And when people can no longer predict how to move you, they begin to treat you differently. Not because you demanded respect, because you stopped volunteering your self-respect away. The real test came when Derek realized Ryan's silence was no longer accidental. It was no longer delay from being busy. It was no longer hesitation from weakness. It was choice. And choice is what makes people uncomfortable when they are used to having access. On a Tuesday afternoon, during a project review, Derek placed a folder beside Ryan and said, "You are probably the best person to clean this up by tomorrow morning." The sentence sounded like praise, but Ryan could feel the hook inside it. Best person. Clean this up. Tomorrow morning. It was the same old pattern, wearing a better suit. A few people looked at Ryan, waiting for the familiar response. The agreeable nod. The quick smile. The quiet surrender. Derek leaned back, calm and casual, as if the answer had already been given. Before, Ryan would have accepted instantly, then resented it privately. This time, he did not reach for the folder. He looked at the schedule, then looked back at Derek and said, "I cannot take that on by tomorrow." The room became still. Derek gave a short laugh, not loud enough to be openly disrespectful, just sharp enough to test him. "That is new," he said. "I thought you were the flexible one." There it was. The social pressure. The little label designed to pull Ryan back into the old identity. Flexible. Helpful. Reliable. Available. Ryan felt the old instinct rise in his chest. Explain. Apologize. Prove you are still good. But he let the instinct pass without obeying it. He kept his voice level. "I can review it later this week, or someone else can take the first pass." Then he stopped. No extra words. No nervous smile. No emotional discount offered to make his boundary easier to accept. Derek stared at him for a second longer than usual. Ryan could feel the room watching, but for once he did not let the room become his judge. Derek tried one more angle. "We are all stretched, Ryan." It was not cruel. It was worse than cruel. It was reasonable enough to make refusal feel selfish. That is how pressure often works in real life. It does not arrive as an attack. It arrives as a moral invitation to abandon yourself. Ryan nodded once. "I understand. I am stretched too." The silence after that sentence did something Ryan had never felt before. It did not expose him. It protected him. Derek had thrown urgency, praise, guilt, and social pressure at the same locked door, and this time it did not open. That was the shift. Power did not move because Ryan embarrassed Derek. Power moved because Ryan stopped embarrassing himself by agreeing against his own limits. A coworker finally spoke up and said she could handle the first pass if the deadline moved. Another suggested splitting the task. The room adjusted because Ryan did not. And Derek, for the first time, had to plan around Ryan instead of through him. That is the moment access loses its illusion of ownership. When someone realizes your yes is no longer automatic, your no becomes real. Ryan walked out of that meeting calm, almost quiet inside. He had not won a battle. He had ended a pattern. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let people meet the boundary they were hoping you did not have. Ryan was no longer trying to become more respected by becoming more useful. That was the identity shift. For years, he had believed his value lived inside his ability to be needed. If people called him first, he felt important. If they trusted him with extra work, he felt chosen. If Derek depended on him under pressure, part of him mistook that pressure for proof that he mattered. But need is a dangerous mirror. It can make exploitation look like belonging. It can make exhaustion feel like purpose. It can make a man confuse being used with being valued. After that meeting, Ryan felt something inside him settle. He did not need to punish anyone. He did not need to withdraw from the world. He simply stopped treating every request as a referendum on his worth. A late message was just a late message. A disappointed tone was just a disappointed tone. Derek's approval was no longer the hand that raised or lowered his value. Ryan still cared about doing good work. He still cared about people. But care without self-abandonment felt different. It felt cleaner. He began to understand that respect does not come from being endlessly available. It comes from being present by choice. It comes from knowing when to give, when to pause, when to say no, and when to let silence carry the weight your explanations used to carry. The old Ryan was afraid that boundaries would make him less liked. The new Ryan saw that a life without boundaries had made him less real. People had known what he could do for them, but they had not known where he ended. Now they did. And that changed the way he walked through the office, through relationships, through small daily pressures that once owned him. His phone could light up without commanding him. Someone could need something without possessing him. Someone could be disappointed without becoming his emergency. This is what it means to control your value from within. You stop making your identity available for public editing. You stop asking every person, every boss, every partner, every friend to confirm that you are still good enough. You stop performing usefulness as a substitute for self-respect. Ryan had not become less kind. He had become less afraid. And that made his kindness stronger because it was no longer being rented out by guilt. Derek noticed. Others noticed. But Ryan no longer needed their recognition to prove the change was real. He could feel it in the pause before he answered, in the calm after he said no, in the quiet dignity of not explaining himself. Into exhaustion. The man who once feared being unavailable had become a man whose access meant something. And when you stop reacting like someone who needs approval, the world starts treating you like someone who has value. This is not only Ryan's lesson. It is the quiet test happening in your own life every day. At work, people may praise your dedication, but they are also learning how far they can push before you protect your time. In love, someone may say they care about you, but their behavior shows whether they respect your limits or only enjoy your availability. In family, people may call it loyalty when what they really want is unlimited access to your energy. Among friends, they may call you dependable while slowly forgetting that dependable people get tired too. Most people do not test your words first. They test your boundaries. They test whether guilt can move you, whether urgency can own you, whether disappointment can make you abandon yourself. And if your boundary only exists when nobody challenges it, it is not a boundary yet. It is a wish. The world learns you through repetition. If every no becomes an explanation, people learn to negotiate. If every late request becomes your emergency, people learn not to plan. If every cold tone makes you chase warmth, people learn how to steer you. This does not mean everyone is trying to manipulate you. It means people adapt to the access you repeatedly provide. Ryan's change was not about becoming unavailable to life. It was about becoming unavailable to being taken for granted. That is the difference. Real respect begins when your kindness has structure, your time has value, and your presence is no longer treated like something anyone can reach without care. Dark psychology is not meant to turn you into the person who wounded you. That is the line Ryan had to understand. Chase you. Real power is no longer chasing every person who knows how to trigger your fear. Toxic control says, I will make you feel unstable so I can feel important. True self-mastery says, I will remain stable even when you try to make my limits feel wrong. Ryan was not learning these rules to dominate Derek. He was learning them so Derek's pressure could no longer dominate him. That difference matters. A boundary is not a weapon. It is a door with a lock. Silence is not a trap. It is the space where you choose your response. Emotional control is not becoming cold. It is refusing to let guilt make decisions for you. When you understand the hidden game, you do not need revenge. You need discipline. You need the courage to stop being available to people who only respect access when it benefits them. Because the goal is not to become dangerous to others. The goal is to stop being easy prey for urgency, guilt, praise, disappointment, and every quiet pressure that once made you abandon yourself. Ryan became unreadable in the quietest way possible. He stopped reacting before he had chosen who he wanted to be. His phone could light up late at night, and his body no longer treated it like a command. Derek could use a colder tone, and Ryan no longer rushed to warm the room back up. Someone could hint that he was being less flexible, and he did not immediately open his life for inspection. He still felt things. He still noticed pressure. He still understood when people were disappointed. But his emotions were no longer public property. He spoke less because he no longer needed to prove every boundary was reasonable. He observed more because behavior revealed what words tried to hide. He did not rush to show irritation, guilt, fear, or the old hunger to be approved. That made him harder to control. People could ask, but they could not assume. They could pressure, but they could not command. They could be disappointed, but they could not turn that disappointment into ownership. Derek still tested him sometimes, but the old Ryan no longer appeared. In his place was a calmer man, slower with access, cleaner with words, heavier in silence. Ryan had not become cold. He had become selective. And there is a quiet power in a person who no longer begs to be respected. They do not need to announce their value. They make you feel it by what they no longer give away. By the end, Ryan no longer needed Derek to understand him. That was the final freedom. Derek could still send late messages, test his limits, or use that calm pressure that once made Ryan feel responsible for everything. But Ryan no longer treated pressure as permission to abandon himself. He had learned that respect does not begin when people finally become fair. It begins when you stop making unfair access easy. The old Ryan believed that being constantly available would make him valuable. The new Ryan understood that value without boundaries becomes invisible. He did not become selfish. He became self-owned. He did not stop caring. He stopped letting care be used as a leash. And that is the identity shift most people never reach.